paying premium prices for a smartphone when, like, 45% of its parts budget is swallowed by temporary memory alone feels like buying a low-delivery car and finding out half the sticker price went to the glove box. We have a massive stack of supply chain leaks, manufacturing blueprints, component pricing projections. Our mission here is figuring out why a historic memory inflation crisis forces Apple into a corner with its upcoming iPhone 18 lineup. They are fracturing their traditional release schedule and pushing insane physical hardware redesigns just to survive the math.
Freezing the entry-level iPhone 18 at 8 gigabytes of RAM serves as their immediate defense mechanism. LPDDR5 memory, the specific type of low-power temporary storage your phone uses to keep apps running in the background, is undergoing a historic pricing shock.
Contract prices hovered around like $3 per gigabyte in early 2025.
Market analysts track a 400% surge, scaling up to a projected $15 per gigabyte by 2027. Equipping a base model phone with 12 gigabytes of memory under those market conditions slaps a $180 price tag onto a single internal component.
That kind of RAM inflation is like your apartment rent hiking up 400% while the square footage stays exactly the same. You are bleeding cash just to stand in the same room. I need to understand what forces a tiny sliver of silicon to multiply in price that aggressively in under 2 years.
Diverting global fabrication capacity to feed data centers creates a massive supply vacuum. Memory manufacturers are converting their mobile RAM production lines to produce high-bandwidth memory for enterprise artificial intelligence servers.
They prioritize selling massive memory arrays to server farms over supplying small chips to smartphone builders.
The mobile memory supply plummets. The cost of outfitting a handheld device skyrockets. Apple is watching memory costs escalate from a tiny 10% slice of the hardware budget to a 45% behemoth.
Absorbing a $180 component cost destroys the profit margins on a $799 entry-level device. They are actively eating these cost surges just to fight for market share against competitors. Even a trillion-dollar company hits a mathematical wall.
Delaying the base iPhone 18 and the thinner iPhone 18 to spring 2027 buys the supply chain time to stabilize.
If you are listening to this on a base model iPhone right now, your traditional upgrade path is about to disappear.
The standard fall 2026 launch window shifts into an exclusively premium tier. Only the iPhone 18 Pro at 6.3 inches, the 6.9-inch Pro Max, and the highly anticipated foldable iPhone hit the market in September.
The foldable model measures roughly 5.5 inches when closed and expands to approximately 7.8 inches when open.
That creates an entirely new pricing bracket above the Pro Max.
Pushing the entry-level devices to the spring forces anyone who usually upgrades annually in September into the high-end bracket. Apple is eating these massive component costs on the Pro models to maintain their retail pricing, keeping the Pro at $1,099 and the Pro Max at $11,199.
They are radically altering how the internal components are constructed to maximize efficiency, starting with a fundamental shift in silicon manufacturing. Transitioning to TSMC's 2-nanometer process for the A20 and A20 Pro chips demands heavy financial investment.
The nanometer measurement refers to the physical distance between individual transistors on the silicon.
Shrinking that distance allows electrons to travel faster and expend less energy as heat. Manufacturing on a 2-nanometer node costs at least 50% more than the previous 3-nanometer technology due to the extreme ultraviolet lithography machines required to print at that atomic scale.
Firing lasers at microscopic droplets of tin to generate ultraviolet light just to print a circuit board sounds like science fiction.
Passing the cost of those machines down the supply chain explains the premium retail price. Compressing more transistors into that microscopic surface area drives processing speeds up 15%, while simultaneously boosting battery efficiency by 30%.
Explain wafer-level multi-chip module technology. The supply chain reports treat WMCM packaging like magic. I want to know what physical difference integrating RAM directly onto the CPU and GPU wafer makes for the actual person holding the device.
Moving data through a standard logic board relies on a silicon interposer.
The interposer acts as an electrical highway connecting different chips on a motherboard.
Data travels from the main processor across the highway and finally arrives at the temporary memory. WMCM integrates the memory directly onto the logic die, the main processor brain eliminating that highway entirely.
Fusing the memory and the processor means the data simply crosses the street instead of driving down a highway. You eliminate the travel time and the power loss during transit.
Eliminating physical distance shrinks the entire footprint of the logic board. Gaining that physical real estate inside the chassis directly paves the way for the massive 5,100 to 5,200 milliamp hour battery coming to the Pro Max.
You trade motherboard space for raw chemical power storage?
Artificial intelligence tools require rapid, persistent memory access to generate text or analyze images locally. WMCM facilitates that instant data speed while simultaneously freeing up physical volume for battery cells.
Gaining internal space through WMCM packaging immediately creates a vacuum inside the casing. Apple is filling that vacuum with massive new optical hardware, fundamentally changing the physical weight and balance of the phone.
We are seeing dummy models from accessory manufacturers revealing an 11.54 millimeter camera plateau protruding from the back panel.
The total lens region expands to 13.77 millimeters.
The thickness of the Pro Max jumps to 8.8 millimeters. That pushes the total weight past 240 grams.
Dropping a 240-gram phone on your face while doom scrolling in bed feels like catching a thrown brick.
Do average users actually know how to manually control the light entering a sensor?
Most people just point and shoot.
That massive camera plateau houses a variable aperture lens system. Physical and mechanical blades inside the camera module open and close, mimicking the function of a professional DSLR lens.
Handing the average person physical control over mechanical camera blades inside a phone feels like overkill. The physical center of gravity on this device shifts entirely to the top third, where all this dense new glass and mechanics reside.
Users manually dictate how much light hits the sensor. That gives them granular control over overexposure and depth of field in varied lighting conditions.
An 11.54 millimeter plateau means the phone sits at a steep physical angle when placed on a flat surface.
Incorporating a Samsung 3-layer stacked image sensor directly addresses the mechanical demands of that variable aperture system. A traditional image sensor puts the light-gathering pixel layer, the logic processing layer, and the memory all on the same physical plane. A stacked sensor separates those components vertically.
Putting the logic and memory on lower levels allows the top pixel layer to expand in size, catching significantly more photons.
This advanced sensor architecture cuts down on visual noise and massively boosts the dynamic range of the final image.
They're testing a teleconverter for the system. A teleconverter artificially increases zoom reach by extending the effective focal length of the existing glass.
Bending light through additional layers of glass to get closer to a distant subject comes at the direct expense of light intake.
The resulting image gets darker simply because the photons have to fight through more physical barriers.
Expanding the aperture wider directly combats the light loss created by the teleconverter. The hardware engineers a synchronized optical loop.
The teleconverter extends the zoom, the image goes dark, the mechanical variable aperture blades open wider to flood the sensor with light.
The Samsung Stack sensor processes the resulting data to eliminate the granular noise. Every single fraction of a millimeter in that 13.77 millimeter lens region serves that specific mechanical loop.
The back of the device bulks up with heavy glass and steel to house that loop. The front display and the internal networking hardware are shedding their previous physical limitations.
The supply chain leaks regarding the dynamic island present heavily conflicting data. One manufacturing mold from Ice Universe shows a 35% reduction, shrinking the visual widget from 20.7 millimeters down to 13.5 millimeters.
Another leak from Digital Chat Station suggests that reduction is delayed entirely to the iPhone 19 cycle.
Firing an infrared dot projector through a screen creates a severe engineering bottleneck. Under-display Face ID remains definitively out for this production run.
The active OLED matrix, the screen you look at every day, consists of millions of microscopic light-emitting diodes packed tightly together.
Firing a precise infrared grid through the microscopic gaps between those diodes bends the light. The biometric scanner receives a distorted reflection, making secure facial recognition impossible.
The visual footprint of the front screen remains constrained, but the internal networking hardware ignores those limitations entirely. Apple's C2 modem officially replaces the Qualcomm chips they relied on for over a decade.
Bringing millimeter 5G connectivity entirely in-house via the C2 modem fundamentally changes their networking architecture. The C2 introduces new radio non-terrestrial networks.
This grants full internet access and third-party app functionality over a direct satellite link.
Phased array antennas inside the phone electrically steer the signal to track low Earth orbit satellites moving at 17,000 miles per hour.
The C2 modem handles the Doppler shift of that rapidly moving orbital target.
The device maintains a stable data connection without the user physically aiming the phone at the sky. Users operate Apple Maps, sync their Photos app, and connect to non-Apple software directly through those satellites when terrestrial 5G networks fail.
Satellite internet for third-party apps destroys the last remaining excuse for missing a Slack message during a remote hiking trip. You stand on an isolated glacier hundreds of miles from a cell tower, and your phone beams a Q3 marketing report down from space.
Bypassing cell towers completely changes the utility of the hardware in remote environments. It permanently tethers the user to the grid. Wrapping this internal hardware demands an updated aesthetic approach from the design team.
Apple is entirely eliminating the two-tone back glass seen on the iPhone 17 Pro models. Altering the back glass manufacturing process minimizes the visual color difference between the rear panel and the aluminum frame, creating a unified visual block.
They are testing Pantone 6076 Dark Cherry as the flagship color for 2026. The previous deep red and dark purple experiments are dropped.
That new dark cherry finish sits alongside light blue, dark gray, and silver. Pantone 2121 Mist Blue from the iPhone 17 generation evolves.
The physical appearance of the device becomes a monolithic slab of color to mask the sheer density of the hardware packed inside. The ceramic shield area specifically designated for MagSafe charging appears slightly transparent on these new manufacturing molds.
Altering the opacity of the charging ring suggests an immediate change in the thermal dissipation strategy. Pumping high wattage power into a 5,200 milliamp hour battery through an inductive coil generates massive thermal runoff.
An 8.8 millimeter thick chassis requires aggressive heat management to protect the expensive 2-nanometer logic board sitting directly adjacent to the battery cells.
Heat destroys silicon efficiency. Fusing the memory and processor together, cramming in massive optical arrays, and relying on inductive charging turn this dense metal slab into a thermal trap. With a 2-nanometer supercomputer in your pocket and full bandwidth internet access beaming down from low Earth orbit to a variable aperture camera system anywhere on the globe, the ultimate luxury might soon be a device that simply allows you to disconnect.